Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the AWS Blogger. I apologize, we're running a little bit behind here. We had some setup, we're ready to go. What I try to do is bring you some casual fun, informative, and interactive conversations around AWS and services. Today we have a live Q&A session with Mai-Lan Tomsen Bukovec, Global VP of AWS Block and Object Storage Services. Before I bring Mai-Lan on, we're going to be taking questions live, so feel free to post them into the chat, and let me see if I can bring them in. We have a list of questions to go through with a short amount of time, but if we don't get to all of them, I'll either get them posted or we'll have another session. Now, what I'd like to do is introduce Mai-Lan. Mai-Lan, how are you?
Hey, John. Nice to see you again.
Yes, this is awesome. I'm glad we get a chance to do this. I love working with AWS, anybody internal, partners, customers, and bringing some Q&A sessions, some interactive podcasts. So, I really appreciate you carving out some time of your day to take some questions live for anybody and everybody.
Happy to be here.
All right, so let's do a quick recap. Over the last month, we worked on a 3-part mini-series around Amazon S3. In the first episode, we got to get to know you personally, from a Forestry Volunteer to a recreational boxer. And we just started scratching the surface and talking about Amazon S3 or storage in general. In episode 2, it's really where we started to dive deep with data explosion and using Amazon S3 for diverse workloads. In our final episode, which was probably the most in-depth one of Amazon storage, we talked about modern data architecture, Amazon S3 access points, which is very interesting, by the way. And then, obviously, I had that pop quiz at the end of Amazon S3 storage classes, which, by the way, you ace with flying colors. So, do you have anything to say before we jump in there?
No, it's just, I think I mentioned this in some of the discussions that we had earlier. We work every day on storage, and whether it's EBS or S3 or Glacier, we are 100% building the services that customers want. So I'm excited to hear what questions have come up from different folks, and would love to help any way I can.
Awesome. So let's everybody, feel free to post your questions below. I also posted a blog post that we got out as quick as possible that recaps all the episodes, and then it highlights this live Q&A session. I will get it updated with the video link for this so you can watch it on demand. It's in there. Go ahead, watch it on your own so you can get up to speed on all the episodes. Now, I know we have a short amount of time here, and what I'd like to do is jump right into the Q&A, if you're good with that, Mai-Lan.
Sounds great.
All right. So the very first, and I believe this is going to be one of our most important questions, is there have been a number of news stories around recently of AWS customers having sensitive data exposed because of their Amazon S3 buckets were configured to allow public access. Why does this keep happening?
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to start, John, by saying S3 is secure by default. And so, as you know, when you first set up a bucket, the bucket access is locked down to root administrator and account owner. However, when we built S3, we knew that we would build it for, as we talked about earlier, a wide diversity of applications. And we have applications and application owners that actually need to have open access to the bucket because they're hosting assets for websites. Sometimes we have folks who are collaborating on a project, for example, right? And they are using the bucket as a way to do that. So by default, it's secure. By default, it's locked down to root administrator and account owner. But we have customers who change the configuration, and they change the configuration based on the needs of their application. So we operate in a shared security model. And so we build the capabilities into our services to achieve the highest degree of security, which includes that default I just talked about. But the application owner also has a responsibility to be able to configure that properly. And if I think about, how we've evolved this service over time, not just within S3, but also across AWS, our goal is to give customers the most control and the most ability to be able to do that configuration. So I'll give you an example. A couple of years ago, we launched something called Block Public Access. And every time I talk to a customer, I tell them to use Block Public Access. It's a control. It's actually not, I mean, you configure it on an account, organization, or a bucket level, but the way to think about it, the mental model there is it's a control. And the reason why it's a control is that it overrides any object level or bucket level settings. Okay, so the way I talk about it with customers is if you put Block Public Access on your account or at the organization level, so the highest level scope you have, it not only overrides any individual object settings to make that access public, but it overrides all the bucket settings and any new objects or buckets you add. That's the important part. It's not just putting that control over your existing data, it's also protecting you from maybe somebody going in and misconfiguring a specific object or the bucket later because it's an override. It's a control. And so we strongly recommend, because so many of our customers don't want that public access, but they might have somebody in their organization that sets it up in a way that they don't intend for the access. So we strongly recommend use Block Public Access. And, you know, it's not just within S3 that we have capabilities like that or server access logs that help you analyze your access patterns. If you look at the other services that we've built over time, and one of the most recent ones that I think is super interesting is IAM Access Analyzer. That was launched in November of last year, and it's based on essentially mathematical proofs. It uses automated reasoning, and what it does is it can analyze hundreds or thousands of policies in seconds and tell you which of your resources, including S3 buckets, are accessed from outside, right, in a public way. And so that's a really interesting auditing tool that you can go in and use. It's free of charge, just like Block Public Access is, and it helps you get this view of, you know, that the Access Analyzer helps you get this immediate view of, you know, where you have policies that are inadvertently keeping your access open. I think the other thing to think about is that it's as easy as going into the AWS Management Console too. If you just look at your list of buckets, we changed the console a couple of years ago, so we would very prominently just list, you know, if the bucket access policy is set to open or not. And, you know, just beyond that, like we have services like Macy, and Macy will go and look for, you know, PII type of information that's in your bucket. We have Guard Duty for S3, which does everything from anomaly detection to intelligence reporting. It looks for where you have requests coming from, you know, new geographic locations. I mean, there's a lot of things that we put in place, but, you know, as I said, it is a shared model. We can build all of these capabilities into S3, into, for example, you know, if you want to have the type of auditing that you want to do, IAM Access Analyzer. If you want to have the logs that capture all your access, you have server access logs in S3, or you have CloudTrail, and then you have other services like Macy and Guard Duty, and you know, all of these are at customers' disposal. But for me, it just starts with Block Public Access. If every customer who knew that they did not want to have public access to their bucket used Block Public Access, then they would be protected not just now but in the future as well from, you know, inadvertently misconfiguring their object or bucket policies.
You actually bring up a really good point there of blocking the public access. And that was something that came up, and we talked about this in one of our episodes that we had, that you enabled it by default. Then what was that, probably almost 2 years ago, correct?
No, so Block Public Access is something that you turn on. By default, when you set up a bucket, the account access to the bucket is limited to the root administrator or the account owner. That's by default. Every single bucket that you create, that is the default. Block Public Access is something that you turn on And the reason why it is not by default is, again, because as we talked about, we have lots of customers who actually do require that you can access a bucket.
Yeah. What happens with new account creations? Is that something you also have to enable when you create a new account, or for existing accounts, you have to turn it on? And the reason I asked that question, I remember a specific example of AWS Landing Zone that I was troubleshooting some things, and then block public access was turned on. I think that was actually a feature of Landing Zone. So just trying to correlate the two. I think Landing Zone enables that. That's one of the configurations that is by default. So I think that's where I'm bringing it from.
Yeah. So, but John, if you actually turn on block public access at the organization level, again, if the highest level scope that you can turn it on captures all the existing resources under that scope, as well as the future resources put under the scope. And so if you turn on block public access at the account level, it'll cover all of the, at the organization level, it'll cover all the accounts today and in the future, right? So my recommendation is always to put it at the highest level scope, this block public access control, and then have your coverage just last into the future against all the resources that you create under that scope.
Here's a question. I put that at my organization level, and I have an account that needs a S3 bucket for public access. How is that configured if I can't access that? Is there an exception policy, or how do I configure it per account? Or, if it's at the organization level, it shouldn't be allowing me to have that public access. But how
That's right. If you put it at the organizational level, it's not going to allow you to have that access.
Correct.
That's the point.
Yeah.
That's why we are actually doing it, is that we want to make sure that if you can set it at the highest level scope, that it's not possible to go and it's an override. That's why I call it a control, John, is because it overrides anything in the hierarchy underneath that top level of organizations, hopefully, or account as a second choice.
Nice. And one of the things I really wanted to spend a little bit of time on that, because that's the number one top question that I'm getting from the audience. Everybody's talking about security. So I wanted to cover that first. And I actually want to jump in a little bit more in depth here. What can customers do to help ensure that they don't inadvertently expose data by misconfiguring an Amazon S3 bucket? I think you talked a little bit about that, but there's other options there.
Yeah, I think I would also throw out, again, for me, it always goes back to block public access. So if you just think about within sort of the native capabilities of S3, we have block public access, and we have server access logs. Server access logs is very useful to have on, because if you have server access logs on, then you can do an analysis of request patterns or access patterns. You can also use CloudTrail. And what's nice about CloudTrail is that CloudTrail data events actually give you the ability to alarm, right? So you can do an analysis of access patterns, but you can also set alarms if somebody's going to change a permission or something like that. So we talked a little bit about that, and we talked about how you can use Access Analyzer, which I think is super helpful, or just the AWS Management Console or Trusted Advisor. These are all free of charge tools where you can essentially audit to see what your resource access is from outside your perimeter, if you will. I think the other thing I would call out is that if you are using S3 in different regions, as an example, one of the things that we see a lot of customers using is config, AWS config, to make sure that the configuration is consistent across the different regions. And that can be super helpful if you have block public access, as an example, turned on in one region, and you want to make sure that you have that same profile set up in all your different regions. So there's a lot of these different tools at your fingertips, but again, I kind of go back to turn on block public access at the highest level scope.
And then you actually don't have to worry about some of the other tools in there, because it's going to be blocked. So no reason to, as you go through it.
In the future too. That's the key for me.
Yes.
It's not just what you have today, right, in your estate, as it were, but it's what you are going to create in the future with teams that you might not even know you're working with today.
That's a very good point, because one of the things that I always talked about with some of partners or customers I worked with, and they work in a specific region, but they don't know what deployed in another region. If it's all blocked at the top, you're not worried about it being
That's
deployed there.
right.
So that's actually a very good point. You don't know what you're going to have in the future,
That's right.
so block it from the top. That I like
That's
that. Awesome. Now, the next question is more of I guess a little bit more, because we had episode 1. It was on a personal level there, which I learned a lot about you. I think it was very informative, not only from the Forestry Volunteer and some backstory on that one, but also the recreational boxer. Everybody check out
Mm.
episode 1 there. I got a good video clips of Mai-Lan doing a sparring match, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So this next question it's a 3-part question. So I'll ask the first part. What are you most proud of in the last 10 years at Amazon?
Well, that is a hard question, because there's a lot of things that that I'm proud of. I think, for me, what I really find interesting, and what I am proud of Amazon and our customers collectively at doing, is not being afraid to reimagine the boundaries of what storage traditionally has meant. So I'll give you a couple examples. So John, we talked a little bit about access points, and we talked about intelligent tiering. Those are 2 great examples, because in both of those cases, there is no analog for a data center alternative. There's just no analog. If you look at the hardware appliances out there, the way that the hardware appliances work is that you tend to trade off price for performance. Okay, and so if you want to pay more, you get a certain level of performance, and if you want to pay less, then you get colder storage, if you will, right? And so if I think about intelligent tiering, what intelligent tiering does is it basically looks at what the patterns are for data lakes in particular, but any shared multi-tenant data set, and it says, how can we build a storage class that is best suited for these emerging models where customers don't want to trade off on performance in a storage class. They just want to get the discounts where it makes sense for them and their access patterns. And so we built intelligent tiering to give you dynamic pricing based on your access pattern, but your performance is still the same. You don't have to trade off there, and you don't have to track your access patterns. It's just built into the storage class. And so, we don't come up with ideas like that, or access points, which separates logically the access from the storage itself. So you can create these ephemeral access points and vend them out to an application that has a VPC only policy, or it has a read only policy to it. We don't come up with these ideas without working with some of the most innovative and creative customers on the planet. I mean, those customers that we talk to every day are doing amazing things within their own applications and their own industries. And when they talk to us, as they do every day, about what they're doing, we think about how we can help them. And so the thing I am the most proud of over the last 10 years is how we have collectively worked together to just reimagine what storage is, not just now, but for the future of applications.
So there's a couple of things that you mentioned, and I got to highlight. One, working with not only the most imaginative customers and how they're using some of the services. I actually think I might do an episode on AWS services and what we developed it for, but what customers are using it for and how unique that is. That will be a separate one. You also mentioned S3 intelligent tiering. And that is actually a question I have for you, and I'm going to get to that in a second. I know this was a 3-part question, but I might have to jump to that question. And that's probably another one. The access points, that's the one. So the access points was pretty much one of our episodes, episode 3. And we highlighted a lot of important parts about that. And I think that was very unique, not only for our customers, but developers just in general on that. So those are really good points. I got to jump back to intelligent tiering, and then I'll come back to these questions. Quick question for you. When was intelligent tiering released or launched?
That was launched in 2019.
So 2019, this was launched, but it's actually picked up a lot of progress in Steam here in the most recent months. And I think, not only this is a slow adoption, but also a good point here during this current situation that a lot of people and a lot of customers are finding it really valuable to save money and also to handle it. And they don't have to do much for it. They just have to turn it on, see, configure what they want to be done with it. And they're not having any performance degradation, correct?
Mm-hmm. That's right. It's the same performance within the storage class. The performance characteristic is the same, and the dynamic pricing is just based on an individual object's access in a given month.
Yes, I remember that from our episode. Very good point on that one. I'm going to get back to actually the question that I was asking. So the second part of that one, what did you predict and what was a surprise? Now, this goes back to what were you most proud of in the last 10 years? Think about maybe what you predict or what was the surprise, and I'll take either one of them.
Well, we actually did think that intelligent tiering, just like Glacier Deep Archive, which is $1 per terabyte, released at the same time, we thought both of these storage classes would be popular. I think the very rapid adoption was frankly fun to watch because people just got it. You just would explain it in a few sentences and people are like, great. And I think what we're seeing now is that in a lot of cases, people are using it as the default storage class for data lakes. Our actual default in S3 is standard storage class, which is a great storage class. But people who are working in a data lake or in a data lake architecture are dealing with different data sets. And the data sets are sort of logically joined, if you will, by the usage of the application that sits on top or actually accesses the data lake. And definitionally, because they're dealing with all of these multiple data sets, right? Some of that data is going to be less active than other sets. And so, we knew that data lakes would be, a very common use case for intelligent tiering. I think that very rapid adoption has been really driven by customers thinking it's perfect for data lakes and starting to use it as a default for some very large data lakes. And as you know, S3 has more data lakes than any other provider out there, and it's just not only the volume of data lakes, like how many we have, but we have some of the biggest data lakes out there, and a lot of them are running on intelligent tiering.
Interesting. Nice. I like that. Knowing that one, I think that was actually in one of our episodes, knowing that, we have the most data lakes out there in S3. So very good point on that one. I'm going to round out that question. This was looking into the future. I actually like this part of it. What are some predictions you have? It says for the next 10 years, but I think if you look at the next 1 to 2 years, that's really further out based off the recent changes. So what are some of your predictions in the future, we'll say?
Yeah, I think really that the major shifts that started a number of years ago for companies, both companies that started off as startups and then grew very rapidly into enterprises, as well as companies that came from a more traditional growth pattern or a more traditional market, they are all going to the cloud. And so if I think about the next 1 to 3 years, I'm actually thinking that it's going to rapidly accelerate. I think certainly in this COVID-19 situation, it's really brought home to a lot of customers that knew they were thinking or going to the cloud soon. It's brought home why. All of the difficulties and the overhead and the cost of data center management have really come home quite significantly for a lot of customers in the last 6 months, and it's accelerated a lot of that movement. So I think what you're going to see in the next 1 to 3 years is really an acceleration of what's already been a fast-moving a fast-moving trend as customers put together the cost and the agility benefits really brought home in the last 6 months, and they just go faster on this. And I think S3 will be at the heart of a lot of the storage for the existing and new applications.
Some of the things that you mentioned there, I'm gonna add on to that one and I'm referring back to some of our episodes because these just correlate with me. In episode 2, you talked about data explosion. So this was something that's really in progress, but happened and started really ramping up in the last 6 months. The thing that you're talking about now, and I'm going to add on to your future one because I think you really kind of nailed it down here, is the modern data architecture. What's happening now and looking towards the future. So you also touched on that portion as well. That's in episode 3, modern data architecture. The very important topic, which we also talk about, S3 access points, which are mind blowing to me. So, I got to just add on to your comments there because I think you're predicting some of the future in those episodes as well.
Yeah, I think, the centralization of data in a data lake is really a foundational aspect of the applications that are going to be built in the future. And you look, John, you look at the rise of, customers that are trying machine learning and incorporating that. You have many customers who use it as part of their basic workflows today. At its heart is this idea of a multiple data sets in a multi-tenant architecture. And that is just common sense. That's just taking all those data silos that may be scattered across all those different, data centers that you have over a country or a world and putting it in one place so you can get more value out of it. It's just, it just makes sense. It's practical. And, frankly, it is going to be the pattern of what customers do with their application set in the future. We're seeing it now.
I agree with you. Now, I know we're going to be running a little bit short on time here. I got 2 more questions for you so we can get those in and we don't have to rush them as well. The next question I have for you from one of our customers out there, how does working with big customers like Netflix help with the everyday experience of smaller customers whom have very different needs?
Yeah, I think we work very closely with all customers. And so, we spend time with all types and sizes of customers. And I think we actually think that the interaction with all sizes of customers help us build better services and better experiences for customers. And so, when I think about how we interact with our large customers, they have some really interesting things that they're doing with very, very large data sets, very large, hundreds of petabytes, right? In some cases, exabytes of data. And so the needs of those customers often do centralize on things like, awareness of the corpus of storage, right? So, how much storage do I have? How do I manage it? And, we built a lot of features like, I'll give you an example, batch operations, which is the ability to essentially create a job that takes an operation like copy or set echo and apply it across millions or trillions of objects. And we built that type of capability because we had a lot of feedback from customers who had, tens or hundreds of petabytes or exabytes that, they would have to build applications to make changes to echoes or take these little operations and run them across the corpus of their storage. And so we built batch operations so customers didn't have to do that. But we have a lot of customers who also benefit from that type of capability as well. And so I'll give you an example. If somebody wanted to copy storage using the copy API, and they want to do it in batch operations, and they didn't want to write an application, they can just go into the console and do that. And so the simplification that we build into, if you think about it as, large scale data management type of scenarios, we also architect it so that you can do it in the console, you can do it in the CLI, and you can do it in a way that's quick and easy for smaller sets of storage as well. And so, and that actually benefits the larger customers because we're constantly thinking about that simple experience. Not, engineering for complexity, but really with S3, as you know from the name, engineering for simplicity. And so that is one aspect of how there's a sort of symbiotic relationship between how we work with small and large customers at the same time. And, you know, to be honest too, like a lot of our large customers, they are just so on the cutting edge. They're doing amazing things. And what's happening is that our smaller customers are learning from them. And they learn from them in different ways. They learn from them by watching. Netflix is great about sharing a lot of the lessons that they've learned along the way. Our reInvent conference, which we have every year, really focuses on putting customers up there, talking about their experiences. And so, you know, it's really just one customer race for us. And we learn from, you know, all sizes of customers and the customer base that we have. We interact with all of them, and they learn from each other. And I think that's great, and part of the kind of culture and mission for AWS.
That is a very good point on that one. When I read that question, I was like, wait, I think I can answer that one too. And we've kind of talked about that a little bit. S3 was designed for diverse workloads. So it wasn't actually designed for an enterprise or a large customer. It was designed for everybody in mind. So I don't think it singles anyone out. I really love how anybody can use it. And it's suitable not only for smaller companies, but, you know, hundreds of companies, large companies, and you just mentioned it, like petabytes of data, and it just handles it. So, you know, I hate to use the words, but we went and talked about this in our episodes, diverse workloads, and I think that was in actually episode 2. But that's actually some of the points that you're bringing across. Nice, I like that. All right, so we have time for one more question, and then I'm going to round this out. All right, Mai-Lan, this is probably, I want to say, I don't want to say the second biggest question because we talked about security and some of the other stuff, but what are some ways I could save costs with all the data I'm storing in Amazon S3? I think you mentioned intelligent tiering, but we can talk about some of that as well.
Yeah, I think, it is not the most important question, as you say, John. Security is job one.
Yep.
It's job one for us, is job one for our customers. So that, you know, I'm glad we spent time on block public access and all of the different services and capabilities and not just S3, but across AWS that customers can use. Cost is always important, and I feel like we spent a lot of time as well thinking about it. Cost reduction is in our DNA. We focus a lot on it from a design perspective, and we want to make sure that we're constantly inventing new capabilities that help customers with cost and help them fit, if you will, their application to the lowest cost profile they possibly can do. And so, we introduced new storage classes like intelligent tiering, where we talked about you have the dynamic pricing, where you can save on your storage bill without doing any work. It's just the behavior of the application storage that's giving you dynamic discounts. We also have Deep Archive, which we built for our lowest cost storage class. It's a Glacier storage class, which means it has an asynchronous retrieval pattern. You can get your data back in 12 hours, which is way faster than tape, and it's much better as well. And so I think part of the cost picture is always going to be choice in your storage classes. And we have those 6 storage classes. We have, I think of 2 of them are the general purpose ones, which are standard and intelligent tiering. People just use standard for everything, as you can do. Intelligent tiering is it's looking like it's defaulting into what people use for data lakes, which is awesome. But if you really want to save the most amount of storage and you know the patterns of your storage class, ZIA is actually, that's one zone storage, but it's for infrequent accessed storage, and it's our cheapest S3 storage class. And so ZIA is great for copy data and things like that because it's in a single AZ, which means you can't, while we have a very similar architecture in there, it won't withstand the loss of that AZ. All of our other storage classes, including the Glacier ones, are 3AZ. And the 3AZ makes sure that we have all of, if you happen to lose a data center, data facility, which we've never done, then you're not going to have any impact on your storage. And so, you can pick ZIA, you can pick SIA, which is, again, that infrequent access, but it's across 3 AZs. And you can use our lifecycle policy to tier storage between different storage classes. And so, if you're looking to pick your storage class, the first thing I'd look at is your patterns on your storage. And if you don't know your patterns on your storage, and you're not going to delete your storage in 30 days, and it's bigger than 256K, I just use intelligent tiering if you want to save on costs, right? Because that is going to get you your dynamic pricing for your data sets where the access is variable, or you don't know it. If you know that your data is accessed, let's just say once a month, then use infrequent access, because in the infrequent access storage classes, SIA or ZIA, tend to be the most cost efficient if you already know and you have very predictable storage access patterns. But don't forget Glacier. I will have to say that I talk to customers all the time, and every time we dig into this, your data is always colder than you think. Right? Like, yep, people are like, my data is being accessed by all my applications. And in fact, when you go down and you do your analysis, your data is usually colder than you think. And so I always recommend that people do an analysis and, and really kind of understand if you can put your data into the 2 Glacier storage classes of Glacier or Deep Archive, you will save a lot of money. And if you have to retrieve it, you still can. And Glacier has the ability, as an example, to retrieve in 2 to 4 minutes if you need it. At expedited retrieval, you pay a little bit more, but you can get it in minutes. And so where you can use the Glacier storage classes, you should totally do it. And in fact, we see customers do this for DR all the time. They use our cross-region replication engine where they set up a policy. I think you and I talked about how part of the design of S3 is that when you're configuring, we really like using policies for access point security, or in cross-region replication or in lifecycle, you just set up policies. And if you set up a policy for cross-region replication, you can have in your source region, you can use whatever storage class you want, and you can actually configure in your destination region that the storage is Deep Archive. And so you have your second copy, but your second copy is being priced at the incredibly low price of Deep Archive, and you can save a lot of money. You don't have to use the same storage class in your source and your destination region. So, my advice for customers who want to really look at cost is take advantage of the variety of storage classes that we have, and take advantage of it when you're thinking about if you want to use it also for cross-region replication and other things where you can kind of mix and match what storage class you use at the source and the destination.
Mai-Lan, I have to tell you, you just educated me once again on some of S3's capabilities and some of the things our customers are doing and replicating into a separate storage class for cost savings for their DR or backup. And I actually didn't even think of that right away because that hasn't come across, but I will remember this. Thank you for that information. I think in every single episode or every time we talk, I learn something new about S3, not only the pop quizzes that we do in its inception and when that happened, but also our last pop quiz on how many storage classes, and we broke it down. And I think access points was probably my second best. Not only intelligent tiering, but access points were one of the things that I really took away from our conversation. So thank you, Mai-Lan. I really appreciate that.
Thanks for having me on, John. And thanks to everybody for asking those great questions. Those were, it was awesome to go into some detail around what you were looking to find out. And please just let me know if you have any others.
Yeah, before I end this and before we end the stream here, I did have a question. Everybody's wondering about this unicorn t-shirt. I have to tell people I wear Amazon t-shirts usually when I live stream. And the reason it is I'm very proud of a lot of the things we do. And I'm proud of this. Symbolizes AWS Game Day. And there's actually a public one happening. An AWS Game Day is an interactive team-based learning exercise designed to give players that chance to put their AWS skills to the test in a real-world, gamified, risk-free environment. So follow me on Twitter. You'll find out on that post. I just wanted to quickly answer that one. Now, we are out of time. So Mai-Lan, thank you so much for doing these episodes with me, for taking live Q&A, not only for myself, but for customers, partners, even other Amazonians. So I really appreciate you carving out the time for it. I loved having you on the show. I'd love to do this again in the future here and have some fun.
All right. Nice talking to you, John.
Yes, thank you.